I figured out his cheating strategy. I'm not sure what to do. The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, the lukewarm coffee doing little to soothe the knot in my stomach. Mark was upstairs, presumably getting ready for his client presentation in Chicago. Chicago again. It was the third time in as many months. We were good, I thought, or at least we had been. 8 years together, 5 married. We had a comfortable life in our renovated Craftsman, a steady stream of dinner parties with friends, weekend trips to the coast, the kind of life people envied. But for the last 6 months, something had been off. He was distant, less affectionate. He'd started working later, his explanations vague. Just closing a big deal, he'd say, kissing me quickly on the forehead before disappearing into his home office. The credit card statements were another red flag. Unexplained expenses at restaurants I'd never heard of, hotel charges in cities he supposedly hadn't visited. When I'd asked, he'd brushed it off as work expenses or mistakes. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But the unease persisted, a constant hum beneath the surface of my life. It started small, a forgotten anniversary, a missed phone call. I chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of his job. But then came the burner phone. I found it tucked away in a dusty toolbox in the garage. A cheap, disposable thing. My blood ran cold. Why would Mark, who had the latest iPhone, need that? I started documenting everything. His travel itineraries, his phone records from the burner, the credit card statements. I downloaded his calendar and noticed the recurring Project Phoenix meetings. He'd mentioned it at dinner once, calling it a crucial sales initiative. But the more I looked, the more suspicious it seemed. It was always scheduled for odd hours and the locations were vague. David, one of Mark's co-workers, came over for poker night last week. I casually brought up Project Phoenix. "So how's that Phoenix project going?" I asked, stirring sugar into my iced tea. He hesitated, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Yeah, it's intense, lots of late nights. Mark's been working so hard," I said, feigning sympathy. "He's always traveling for it." David shifted uncomfortably. Traveling? I thought most of the team was working remotely on that one. My stomach dropped. That night, I drove past Mark's office building around 11 p.m. His car was there. I sat in my car, watching, my hands clammy on the steering wheel. He told me he was in Cleveland, having dinner with a potential client. The next day, I started digging deeper. I cross-referenced the phone numbers from the burner with his contacts. Most were unrecognizable. But one stood out, a local number I didn't recognize, attached to a name that made my skin crawl. Chloe. A quick search on LinkedIn revealed a woman in her early 30s, working in a related industry. She was attractive, successful, and everything I was afraid of. Their paths would have crossed professionally, making the potential for an affair even more plausible. I told Emily, my best friend, everything. We met at our usual spot, a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. She listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. "You need proof, Sarah," she said, swirling her wine. "Irrefutable proof before you confront him." I know, I said, picking at my pasta, "but it's eating me alive. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I feel like I'm going crazy." Emily squeezed my hand. "Then get proof. Hire a private investigator." I hesitated. The thought of hiring someone to follow my husband felt invasive, dirty. But I also knew I couldn't go on like this, trapped in a web of lies. I tried to subtly confront Mark. "Honey, are you okay? You seem stressed lately. Is everything all right with Project Phoenix?" He looked at me, his eyes unwavering. "Everything's fine, Sarah, just a lot of pressure at work." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I promise once this deal closes, things will calm down." His touch felt calculated, insincere. I pulled my hand away, a knot forming in my throat. He was lying. He was looking right at me and he was lying. The Chicago trip. It was scheduled for this week. A crucial client presentation, he'd said. I couldn't take it anymore. I booked a flight to Chicago. I used his travel itinerary to track his movements. He was staying at the Peninsula, a swanky hotel downtown. I pretended to be a prospective client and called the hotel, casually asking if Mr. Mark and Ms. Reynolds were checked in. The receptionist confirmed. "Yes, ma'am, they're in suite 1402. Reynolds. That was her last name, Chloe Reynolds. I found a coffee shop across the street from the hotel. I sat there for hours watching the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw them. They walked out of the hotel, hand in hand. Mark, smiling, his arm draped around her shoulder. Chloe laughing, looking up at him with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in years. They hailed a cab and drove away. I sat there, numb, the coffee growing cold in my hand. The confirmation was devastating. I had hoped somehow that I was wrong, that it was all a misunderstanding. But seeing them together, the affection, the intimacy, it was undeniable. I flew back home that night, a hollow ache in my chest. The house felt empty, sterile. I couldn't bring myself to unpack. I just sat on the couch, staring at the wall, replaying the image of Mark and Chloe in my mind. I started planning. I called Emily and told her everything. She was furious. "That son of a bitch, what are you going to do?" "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "But I'm not going to let him get away with this." Emily connected me with a divorce attorney. I started gathering financial documents, documenting our assets, preparing for the inevitable. I suggested couples therapy to Mark. He seemed surprised but agreed. "Maybe it will help us reconnect," he said, his tone sincere. The therapy sessions were a farce. Mark painted a picture of a loving, supportive husband, struggling to balance work and family. I listened, my jaw clenched, resisting the urge to scream. I wanted to see if he would confess, if he would show even a flicker of remorse. But he didn't. He just continued to lie, skillfully manipulating the therapist, making me sound like the irrational, insecure wife. I was torn. Should I confront him directly, expose his lies? Or should I quietly prepare for my exit, bleed him dry in the divorce, and disappear? The ultimatum came during our last therapy session. "Mark," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I know about Chloe. I know about the burner phone, the late nights, the Chicago trips. I know everything." His face paled. He stammered, denying everything. He tried to gaslight me, telling me I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. Then he became angry, blaming me for his actions. "You've been so distant lately, Sarah, you never listen to me, you're always so critical." I stood up. "It's over, Mark," I said. "I'm done." I packed a bag and left the house. "I need space," I said. "I need to think." He begged me to stay, promising to change. But his words were empty. I didn't believe him. I checked into a hotel on the other side of town. I sat on the bed, staring at my phone. I had drafted a text message to Chloe's husband, exposing the affair. I wanted to destroy her life, to inflict the same pain that Mark had inflicted on me. My finger hovered over the send button. But then I hesitated. What would that accomplish? Would it make me feel better? Or would it just drag me down to their level? The phone vibrated. It was Mark. I ignored it. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and deleted the text message. It wasn't worth it. I needed to focus on myself, on my future. I opened my laptop and started searching for divorce attorneys. Project Phoenix failed, Mark. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I was taking control of my life. And Mark's carefully constructed world was about to crumble.